getting into the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and we are leaning on TSN insider Darren Dreger. Who is Canada's hope to end the drought? Is it Winnipeg or Vancouver, new kids, or is it Toronto, Edmonton, the teams with all the pressure? We'll dive into that. Plus, Sidney Crosby's future in Pittsburgh and the coaching carousel is underway. Dreger is here on the Chirp Podcast with Darren Millard.
Boys, I'm Mike today. Just let everyone know, don't say anything stupid. Heads up! Oh, how'd that feel, old man?
What are you gonna do? You? Ah! That's a disgrace! That's a disgrace! What a joke!
Hit him, light him up.
Yeah, nice hit! That's solid.
Shut up!
Should start this by saying we're under strict instructions today to keep it tight and keep it focused, because apparently Dreger and I talk about our dogs all the time, and Bob Bender saying you gotta focus on the hockey. You gotta wear the tight timeline going into the Stanley Cup playoffs. So here's the TSN insider Darren Dreger with us on the Chirp Podcast. A whole bunch to get to today. Let's start with the end of the regular season and the start of the coaching carousel. How widespread is it going to be as Buffalo kick this thing off with changing coaches?
Yeah, pretty widespread, obviously. And, I thought it was interesting how Kevin Adams approached his media availability on Tuesday, talking about the dismissal of Donnie Granato and part of his staff and taking responsibility, as most general managers would, but also laying blame at the skates of the players, right? And saying, okay, let's stop using the excuse that this group is a young group. Well, they are a young group, but they're loaded with contracts and they've got enough NHL experience that they should have had a more competitive and better year than they did. On top of that, Adams said, look, we need experience on the bench. So when you look at the available list of coaches, who are we talking about here? I'm still in the group that's surprised that Craig Berube is unemployed. I thought that a team would snap him up, given what he did with the St. Louis Blues when he took over that bench and helped them win a Stanley Cup championship. So a high pedigreed coach. Todd McClellan, is he going to be unemployed? Dean Evison, a terrific NHL coach. Go down the list. So that must be the type of candidate that Kevin Adams is looking at. But if you want to shift over to another team, Steve Staios, the GM of the Ottawa Senators, has already began his process. And he's had some conversations. The smart money, he is looking at John Gruden, who's with the Toronto Marlies in the American Hockey League, and at least waiting for the opportunity to further explore the history that Staios and Michael Landauer have with Gruden. But, and this is interesting to me, I didn't know that there were more than 20 NHL assistant coaches with previous NHL head coaching experience. That's how many assistant coaches on NHL benches this season had prior NHL head coaching experience. It's like 25 guys. I mean, it's a big number. So, does that factor into what Adams might do? It certainly does with what Staios is considering in Ottawa. And then you go down the list of some of the other clubs that are in the market for head coaches.
So you've got 4 teams with interim guys: New Jersey,
Yeah.
LA, Ottawa, St. Louis. No, LA's in the playoffs. What do we expect out of Travis Green in New Jersey? St. Louis, obviously, Drew Bannister.
Yeah. Well, if you want to start with Drew Bannister, it seems likely the interim label is going to get removed from Bannister. I mean, he's been an up-and-comer in the organization, has paid his dues, highly regarded there. So unless there's a sudden change of heart. And again, as this thing posts, I guess we have to be mindful of the fact that, Thursday is the end of the NHL regular season. The Buffalo announcement came as a surprise to many. I mean, my Buffalo sources less than 3 weeks ago said that it was unlikely they were going to make a coaching change. And then Kevin Adams decides, no, we're pulling the trigger, and good on him. I mean, he feels and has to do what's best for his organization. Could Army do the same in St. Louis? I guess it's possible, but the intelligence I've received is that it's likely Bannister stays there. I'm in the camp that thinks that Travis Green's a good head coach. And I know that, when he had his initial situation, when he left Vancouver, there was an expectation that he wasn't going to have to sit out that long, and not dissimilar to what Andrew Burnett went through, in New Jersey, then ends up in Nashville. I think that Green went about this the right way. Not that he cherry picked in New Jersey looking for that opportunity, but the reason that he was there, who's kidding who, is that it was a plan B, a good insurance policy for Tom Fitzgerald and the New Jersey Devils. So I don't think, it doesn't sound like it's likely they're going to dive back into that market and try and change unless something has happened in there that we're unaware of. I expect that Travis Green will stay on.
We had a real surge of changes with the manager position a couple of years ago. With the pressure that's on these organizations, is there any heat being applied there?
There's always heat there, and understandably so, but it doesn't feel like there's a hot button type of organization on that front. Now I say that and watch regular season will end and something surprising will take place. We know that the Columbus Blue Jackets are going to work aggressively again at the end of the regular season. That's John Davidson and Mike Priest. Could there be somebody who pops into the market? I don't think so. But those guys always feel the heat, and management is a fickle business because, when expectations aren't met, you get to a place where, all of a sudden now you're in the crosshairs. And I'm going to again go back to the Buffalo situation. This is why I've got a lot of time for Kevyn Adams and how he manages. Adams knows that he's put himself on the clock, right? He knows that the way he, described the deficiencies, the disappointment of his team and the changes that are needed, first from a player prep perspective and all of that, well, he's got to bring in some pieces too to make that club better. So he's put himself kind of on the hot seat going into the offseason and into next year. But no, I don't. I mean, if I scoured the league and went through 32 teams, I guess. I mean, Edmonton, what's going to happen there, right? I mean, you've got Kenny Holland on an expiring contract. If the Oilers were to go deep again, or better yet, win the Stanley Cup, does that encourage Kenny Holland to push away from the idea of retiring, or does that encourage Daryl Katz and ownership to go, hey, Kenny, we'd like you to hang in there for another year or two and see what happens? If they get bumped and there's an unlikely chance that there's a discussion between ownership and Ken Holland in Edmonton, maybe he still has some juice left. And then he moves into the discussion. There's already speculation, and I'm part of that, as to maybe he's a fit in Columbus with the Blue Jackets. So, yeah, there's some scenarios that could play out there.
A couple of names that have surfaced, Joel Quenneville and David Carl, two totally different situations there. Are you hearing anything on Q?
More on Q than Dave Carl, to be fair. And I mean, I think we're waiting on Joel Quenneville. What we're waiting for is what he's waiting for, and a lot of people around the National Hockey League are waiting for, and that's clearance from the commissioner, from the NHL head office. He's at a place in his career where clearly he's in the back nine. He's a 65-year-old man who's highly decorated. If there's a team that, is looking for a closer, somebody to come in because for whatever reason this team just hasn't achieved, but they're at a place where they should be a top Stanley Cup contender and they just can't get over that hump. And maybe it's a coaching thing, maybe it isn't, but ownership thinks it is. Then I think that's where a name like Joel Quenneville comes into play. But he's not getting there, nor is Stan Bowman, who's also on the sidelines, until there's a real offer that NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman has to consider. There's been tire kicking on Stan Bowman. There's been opportunities where he could have taken management type jobs, not general manager jobs, but in a hockey operations department, and really hasn't been allowed to. So it does feel like we're finally getting to a place where those two men will be allowed to dive back in. And I think it feels obvious, doesn't it, Darren? I mean, Joel Quenneville's not doing the interview that he did with Andy Strickland,
right,
unless he feels confident that he's going to say the right things, that he's going to hold himself in the process accountable. And maybe that's what the National Hockey League needs to hear publicly to kind of get over that final hurdle.
And Carl from the University of Denver and
Yeah.
he wins a couple of national championships in the last 3 years, a World Junior Championship. Seems like the bright shiny toy right now.
Yeah, and that's appreciable. I think we can all understand why that is. But I'm reminded of Dave Haxtell, who's done a great job with the Seattle Kraken, right? I mean, when he was in North Dakota, his name was out there a lot, right? And then he lands in Philadelphia. There's a good relationship there with Ron Hextall. Didn't work out for Hack in Philadelphia, but he rebuilds and he goes back to being an assistant coach, in this case, in the National Hockey League with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Goes to the World Championships, just works at his craft. And I think if you want to go back to that men's World Championship, I feel like that's the reason that Dave Haxtell got another crack at being an NHL head coach. And the connection,
agree with you there.
Ronnie Francis was part of that management group, right, for Team Canada. They got to know each other. The number of times, excuse me, that we've seen coaches or managers get back into the NHL circle because of the men's worlds, probably too many to count because they spend so much time together, right? But Haxtell has done a real good job. And why wouldn't you, if you're an NHL team that isn't afraid to maybe not even think outside the box? David Carl is an excellent hockey guy. So it's not like you're pulling, look, Marty St. Louis is a Hall of Famer. That's taking a gamble when you're the Montreal Canadiens and you bring a guy out of minor hockey to be an interim head coach, and he's proven the naysayers wrong. I mean, he's done a great job with the Habs. Haxtell's done an excellent job with Seattle. Why shouldn't David Carl be in consideration and be speculated as being top of the chain? He should be, deserves it.
Worked under Jim Montgomery in Denver before Montgomery went to the National Hockey League. So there's a bit of lineage there and connections to the NHL. Future in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
One with Sidney Crosby. Any chance that the Penguins go to him and say, we're going to offer you an opportunity to go somewhere else if you want?
Yeah, I mean, there's that potential, but I think it's flipped. Or Kyle Dubas goes to Pat Brisson, longtime agent for Sid, and says exactly what you just said. Look, man, Sidney is the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's iconic. There'll be a statue there forever. However, if he wants to chase another Stanley Cup, we're not going to stand in his way, but he's got another year left on his contract. So the value in Sid to us and what we might recoup is right here and right now. And that's going into the offseason. If you're Dubas, how do you initiate that face-to-face with your captain? I don't know. Maybe he already has, but it's a delicate one. And I feel like it's a little bit more complicated now because of how Crosby threw that team on his back, in the late stages of the regular season, last third of the regular season, and almost willed this team into the playoffs. Now they fall short, but is there some juice? Not there. We know there's plenty left in Crosby's game, but we saw more in Evgeny Malkin at the end of the regular season. Chris Letang. There's some question marks throughout that lineup. Drew O'Connor, has emerged as a younger piece who looks like he's going to be impactful for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So they don't need to add more experience, but is there enough around that organization with some tweaking? Dubas can still keep that group competitive, keep Sidney Crosby engaged to get through his contract, and then allow him to decide whatever he wants to decide. It's going to be a fascinating offseason in Pittsburgh, and guys like me will be glued to Pat Brisson and Kyle Dubas trying to figure out what direction they want to go with Sid.
Segue into the playoffs that are coming up. Washington gets that final seed. Do you think they can actually do what Florida did last year and make some noise, or is this the summit of their season?
I think it's the summit, and I mean that in a very respectful way. I actually had Washington on the outside looking in, and that was probably 10 games or so, and I don't know where that would fit in minority or majority. It's a fun storyline, not dissimilar to Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins. There would have been more of a romantic feel to Sid, charging his team back into the postseason, and again, revisit the conversation we just had, what that might look like in the offseason. Ovechkin deserves that level of respect from all of us. Their goaltending has been curious, but it's been very, very good of late. I'm not sure that they've got enough there to get by a really good team. I'm not sure for whatever reason, and I think it's more media based than anything. If you're not in that New York market, I don't know that the New York Rangers have been given enough respect for winning the President's Trophy and being a really good team wire to wire. Could they upset? Could Washington upset New York? I guess that's kind of what the first round is often built on, is the idea of the upset. I just don't believe it, and I don't see it. I think it's going to be a good series, but I don't think the Washington Capitals have enough to go deep.
Well, remember, New York was really good last year, and they stumbled in the playoffs. This has been a good team for a couple of years, just haven't been able to get over the hump.
Yeah, and let's keep an eye on Filip Chytil too, right? Like there's a piece that, if available, man, what a boost that might be. Goaltending is everything, as you know, in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and if Igor Shesterkin is as good as he's been, then that could be the undoing. But it'll be, again, we've been blessed with so many good storylines down the stretch here. We really have been in both conferences, more so, the drama that we've seen in locking down the final playoff spots in the East. But when I look at the matchups in the East that we know, man, it's going to be tremendous stuff, and including 1 versus 8. I mean, it's plausible. I just think that the New York Rangers are that good.
Who's your MVP?
Hart? Like who wins the Hart? The player? Yeah. Oh, geez. You know what?
I have Kucherov because he doubles everybody else in points on that team. But
so I'm grinding on this, and we're recording this on Wednesday. Submission date is Friday. So
you're taking it down to the wire?
Right down to but I go through a formula here. So I agree with you on Nikita Kucherov. I think that he's deserving of the Hart. That's saying a lot. When you look at McKinnon and Matthews and McDavid. And again, from the goaltender fraternity here for a moment, right? Are the Winnipeg Jets nearly as good if Connor Hellebuyck doesn't have the season that he's had? Should he not? He's probably going to win the Vezina, but should he not be in the Hart conversation? He's not going to win it, but I have to write 5 names on the ballot. And I can make a case for Connor Hellebuyck being on my ballot. He's not going to win. Right now, I've got Kucherov as my number 1, but it'll come right down to the wire. But now, just to expand on my point and my process here, so let's shift over to the Norris for a moment. I've enlisted. Normally it's 3, but I might just lean on 2 because I'm feel pretty confident in the Norris list. I use ex-Norris winners in helping me formulate the Norris ballot form. And the reason I do it is because the Norris Trophy has gone astray over the years. Yep. It shouldn't be just about who's got the most points as a defenseman. And that's kind of the way it's gone. Now, I got all the time in the world for Quinn Hughes, and chances are he's going to be number 1 on my ballot. But I've historically broken down my gauging of the Norris into quarters. So first quarter, what do you guys think? Second quarter, what do you think? Third quarter, what do you think? Okay, let's wrap up the year. Fourth quarter. And then you culminate all of that, right? And sometimes the eye test matters more than what the stats show you. So I'm right in the thick of it right now. It's coming down to the wire on Friday when I submit.
We're going to get a most offensive defenseman award at some point, which is going to validate the Norris Trophy a little bit more, because you can give that points, the Carlson the year last year, to the most offensive defenseman. It'll happen.
Yeah. Well, look, I when I talk about some of the guys I lean on, these are guys who played the game. Not that I feel I didn't play the game. I mean, you didn't play the game to a pro level, but we still have an educated opinion because we watch a ton of hockey every single night. But a guy like Drew Doughty on the Norris ballot, he plays in a system and has for his entire career, most of his career, where most important thing to Drew Doughty is win hockey games. Yeah. That's what it's about. If he was about the points, he'd have 10, 15, 20 more points a year if he played the game that he's capable of playing. No, he's a team guy and he plays the right way and he defends the way you need to defend. So, anyway, I'm ranting a little bit here, but that's how I go through it.
Do not sell your skill short. Like Wednesday afternoons at Commander Arena at the end of practice, those showdown days between you and I, those were epic.
Yeah, but I moved from a forward to defense because
Oh,
well, you remember I would play defense because, well, number one, nobody wanted to play defense.
No.
And I thought stupidly that if I played defense, I didn't have to skate as much until I realized that no, you actually have to skate a lot. But it got me in better shape playing defense than it was as a lazy right winger.
I love those showdown days. Who's in more of a predicament to succeed, Toronto or Edmonton, going into these playoffs?
It feels like there'd be more, the disappointment would be more bitter, I think, in Edmonton, because they lost the conference final 2 years ago to the Colorado Avalanche. Colorado goes on and wins the Stanley Cup. And maybe that was just a recognition. Colorado was better, obviously, but Edmonton wasn't quite there. Last year, losing to your Vegas Golden Knights soured the Oilers. Hey, full credit. The Golden Knights go on to win the Stanley Cup. So it's not like you got bulldozed here, but they felt like they were a better team. They could have won that series, but they didn't. And every team has salary cap decisions and big, big decisions to make. And Edmonton is right there, aren't they? Like they're right in it. They've got Leon Draisaitl. He's not up, but he's going into the final year. Speculation this offseason is going to be tremendous around the future of Draisaitl, the future around Connor McDavid in Edmonton. So for those reasons, I think that there's a little bit more intensity there. But, I was asked this morning in a very speculative way, if Toronto loses to Boston in that age-old rivalry, does Sheldon Keefe have a job next year on the bench of the Maple Leafs? And I'm an insider. You can't have that information because we don't know Toronto's going to lose to Boston in the first round. But if they did, could I see that as a possibility? Yes. And that would be unfortunate because I think Sheldon Keefe is a good coach and I think he's done a nice job for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So there are different layers of accountability and measure of heat in both Canadian markets, but it just feels maybe a little bit warmer in Edmonton.
So Edmonton, they want to win the Stanley Cup. That's their goal, is to win the Stanley Cup. That's the minimum. There's no other choice. Yeah. Is it the same in Toronto or is it just to make a deep run?
Depends who you ask. If you ask Austin Matthews and the players of the Toronto Maple Leafs, they would say, no, we're here to win the Stanley Cup. That's what players are wired to do. From a realistic perspective, come on. Again, we just went through the path of the Oilers. They've gone deep in the playoffs. So their measure of disappointment has been earned. Toronto hasn't done that. They haven't proven that they can go deep into the playoffs. For me, if Toronto were in some way, shape, or form to get to the conference final, I think that has to be viewed as a roaring success for the team this year. Because you look at the path that they're going to have to go down to get there. We played with this in Toronto all week long. Who would Toronto rather have in round one? Florida or Boston? Well, anybody who watched the Tuesday night game between Florida and Toronto should realize that Florida Panthers team is legit. No different than last year when they went to the Stanley Cup final. They tried to manhandle the Leafs in the first. Didn't work, but that's a tactic that Florida has. Then they absolutely ran them out of the building in the second period en route to that win and sealing up the division. Then you have the history of the Boston Bruins. So I don't know, man. I can't wait for the playoffs to start because this is when the fun really kicks into gear, right? And not just from a fan perspective, but when you work in it like we do and the way I do, I'm not hunting for anyone's job. But the juicy storylines of what could happen, fueled by a level of disappointment. Who's kidding who? When you're in a major market like Toronto, that's kind of where part of the juice comes from anyway. So anything is possible.
Okay, who is Canada's best hope to end the drought?
Yeah. Well, I want to say Edmonton for the reasons that we've already talked about. I'm still not convinced on Edmonton's goaltending. Vancouver, I think Rick Tocchet's going to win the Jack Adams. He's done a marvelous job, as is the coaching staff of the Vancouver Canucks. Thatcher Demko, if he's as healthy as they say he is, and I don't have reason to question that, he's absolutely a difference maker. Can he be that in the regular season? Winnipeg, Hellebuyck stands on his lid. Yeah, I mean, you can make a case for all of those guys. And, let's lump the Leafs into that equation as well. Just feels to me, given the recent playoff experience, success of the Oilers, that Edmonton is probably better positioned.
You got 3 teams out of 8 in the West. Like, you got to hope, Canadians anyway, got to hope that somebody comes out of there.
Yeah, but good luck when you look at that Central Division. Again, I mentioned the New York Rangers earlier in the pod. You're talking, about how they win the President's Trophy. They haven't gone under the radar. That's absurd to say that. But I don't think that they've been given enough attention, perhaps, across the league. I'd say the same in the Dallas Stars, right? I mean, all this team has done is win. Ferraro and I were talking about this the other day on our podcast. I mean, where's the weakness in the Dallas Stars? Unless somebody gets hurt, and that you can apply that logic to any team going into the playoffs. It is as good as the East is. The West is going to be bonkers with how those first 2 rounds, especially the first round, but how the first 2 rounds play out. But Canada's as good positioned as they've been in a long, long time with the 3 Western teams and a little bit of bite in the East as well.
Vegas flying under the radar?
Yeah, I think so, but that's fine with the Vegas Golden Knights. You know that. I mean, the one thing that impresses me most about Vegas, and there's so many different things, is how I think they really embraced not only how difficult it is to win a Stanley Cup, how difficult it is to defend, but the highs and lows that you have to go through coming off the championship and in preparation to defend. And I think that comes from the experience of Bruce Cassidy and the coaching, right? I think he had these guys tuned right up when they drop puck in the regular season. Prepare for it mentally. You're going to hit some stretches of this regular season you're going to hate because we're not going to be very good. That's fine. That's part of it. It's a process. Let's just try and adhere to our identity, all of those good coaching things. But I think that given the maturity of the Vegas Golden Knights, what Kelly did also in leading up to the trade deadline, like that Tomas Hertl trade, that's one for the ages. Like,
did anybody else know he was available?
No. Well, look, I mean, we asked the questions and we publicly had conversation about could he be available. You know how many people knew that Kelly McCrimmon was talking to Mike Greer and the San Jose Sharks? Maybe 6, and 3 of them would work in Vegas in hockey operations, and 3 of them would work with San Jose. Nobody knew that McCrimmon had been grinding on that for as long as he did. That's just artful work. That's what that is. That's masterclass in management to go along with Noah Hanifin, the subsequent extension, and even the Anthony Mantha trade. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that helps you win championships. So, yeah, I mean, Vegas is under the radar, but I can assure you this, nobody in Vegas gives a rat's you know what about that. They're happy to slide under the radar and just see how it plays out in the end.
You can swear on this, Bob. It makes more work for Bob, so it's not bad because he has to keep it out.
Rats, you know what I think sounds more impactful, right? Yeah.
The slogan last year was "It hurts to win." I thought that summed up the run. Perfectly. Yeah. Hey, thanks for doing this. Have a great run. How's Tiny? I got to ask how Tiny's doing.
Tiny is good. I'd flip the camera over there, but I don't think you're going to be able to see her. Tiny has she's got a comfortable spot just outside my home studio office door. It's a glass door, so she can hear me and she can see me, but she's done a better job of staying quiet. So she's just lounging right now.
I love Tiny. Thanks, buddy. Have a good run.
All right. Thank you.
I love my Tiny talks. Follow Darren Dreger on Instagram or Twitter. You'll see Big Tiny. Just it's like a horse. It's amazing. And the fact that it gets under Bob's skin so much when we talk about our pets is absolutely just icing on top of the cake. I want to give you an idea of where we're going with the Stanley Cup playoffs, and this should be the year of the lower seed, not upsets, but the year of the lower seed, because it's hard to call Colorado beating Winnipeg an upset when they're so close, but it would be a lower seed. Toronto gets by Boston. That's not an upset given what the Maple Leafs have for talent, but it would be the lower seed. And I have 5 lower seeds right now that have legitimate opportunities being granted to them to get to the second round. So that's what I'm looking for. Even Carolina, the New York Islanders, like I know where the Islanders have come, but being able to find their groove a little bit, and Carolina is always just struggling to take that next step. So that's what I'm watching for. I'm curious to see whether it's come to fruition. Also, really excited to see what Florida has to offer coming off last year. This is a team that's been interesting. They've been the favorite a couple of years ago, and last year they were the underdog, and they're back to being right at the top with the higher seed. Can they get through? And they got this great rivalry going. That actually hurts them, I think, because Tampa Bay is going to be so fired up for this thing. But Florida, they're better than they were last year, way better. And I think they're deeper, and I think their goaltending is so much more stable going into the playoffs. I think that they could make a run back to a second straight Stanley Cup final. And the other one is Boston. For no other reason do the Bruins change the way teams in the future handle their goaltending in the postseason. If this rotation does come to fruition and Ullmark and Swayman flip-flop, which Montgomery said at the end of last year's playoffs and stuck by in the middle of this year, if that happens, are more coaches open to that? Because somebody has to break the ice. We're such a tradition-based sport, and we love the longevity of the decisions that we're beholden to. But if Montgomery goes down this different path, I think you'll see other coaches, maybe not this year, but other coaches in the future, especially as new coaches join the league, be more open to changing goaltenders, not just when somebody stumbles, but on a night-to-night basis, going with the rotation from game 1 to game 2, and maybe you play a guy, if it goes 7 games, somebody plays 4 and somebody plays 3. It'll be fascinating to watch just how that impacts things. Looking forward to the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's going to be outstanding.
Darren, before you go,
yes,
2 things.
Bob.
First of all, you owe it to the listeners to give your Stanley Cup pick, and I owe it to the listeners to provide my Stanley Cup pick. And then the other thing I want to say is there's one thing I hate more than dogs, and it's people talking about their dogs, okay? I just want to go on record and let everyone know. So give me your Stanley Cup pick. I'll provide mine, and then we'll wrap.
So I will be honest. Like, it would obviously be Vegas, because that's where I'm working, and that's who I'm cheering for. I will take Vegas out of the equation, okay?
I was going to say, take your Vegas Golden Knights goalie helmet off, and let's be objective here.
That's the most fair way to do it. I love what the Florida Panthers have done. Now, if Tampa gets through that, I think they could roll too. But my pick, being challenged to come up with a team to win the Stanley Cup, I'm going to go with the Florida Panthers. The way that they can put the puck in the net and their blue line and their goaltending, I think that there's a significant difference between the Panthers when they're on top of their game and everybody else in the Eastern Conference when they're on top of the game. And with all due respect to you and your New York area teams with the Islanders and the Rangers, because I know that the Rangers, you got that tattoo on the lower part of your hip that shines every night that the Rangers win. I know that, and you say it didn't hurt when you got that tattoo on the lower side of your hip, Bob. But I'm going with the Florida Panthers.
Not true. I'm rooting very, very hard for Paul Maurice, and I tend to agree with you. I think the winner comes out of the East, but to be a little different, a little flavor change here, I'm with Darren Dreger. I think the Dallas Stars have flown completely under the radar, And I love the mix of youth and veterans and even, those tweener players that maybe aren't over the hill and they're not rookies like a Heiskanen and a Hintz who've been through it before. And I love the goalie and we love the coach, the former coach of the Vegas Golden Knights. I am on the Dallas Stars.
Okay, how about this one? We put Dallas against Florida in the final. You know where I'm going with this? Pete DeBoer and Paul Maurice, the best of friends. Like there's you and I, like we're tight. Pete DeBoer and Paul Maurice, best friends, played junior together. Pete DeBoer is a coach because he started helping out Paul Maurice in junior when he was going to law school. The only reason Pete's a coach is just he started moonlighting, helping out his buddy, like helping run practices. And then they became both National Hockey League coaches. They are best friends. Neither one of them has managed to win the Stanley Cup. Putting them together in the final would be an epic storyline.
Well, if we get that final, if we get Stars, Panthers, we will be in Vegas for the draft. And you will have to have me over. Tell your wife, get the private chef going. If the Stars win, I will be sitting in the Millard dining room, and I will be having a wonderful meal. Maybe we just go to the best steakhouse in Vegas. But put a bow on it.
Barry's would be good. We could go to Barry's. That would be nice. Or we could sit poolside at Casa Millard with all of our pets, with Austin and Norman. Norman's deaf, so just don't when you call him.
No. Oh, God.
And then there's Oreo, the little Shih Tzu. You can. I'll even let you hold Oreo. He's so cute. I can't wait. This time next week, we're into it. And maybe the predictions are coming true and I'll brag up a storm, or maybe I'll just bypass all this and get into what's taking place. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Gus, Darren Dreger, for joining us. Some incredible insight there. Love what he had to say about the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll be following that with zeal. It's the Chirp Podcast with Darren Millard. We'll talk to you next week.